Better Preach, episode 49, How to Be a Great Emcee. Welcome to Better Preach, a podcast for Catholic leaders on delivering and developing great Catholic talks. I'm your host, Ryan O'Hara, a 25-year vet of college and young adult ministry. Thanks for inviting me into your journey of communicating the true, the good, and the beautiful. In this podcast, we have focused almost all of our attention on helping people get better at giving discrete talks, teachings, or testimonies to Catholic audiences, whether that's at retreats, conferences, in homilies, ministry nights, you name it. But there's another kind of speaking in the Catholic world that is super important and often overlooked, and it doesn't involve addressing an audience through one keynote talk, teaching, or testimony. And that's the role of an MC. Sometimes called a host, the MC plays a really influential and important role for many Catholic events. But what makes for a great MC? And what skills does an MC need that isn't required of other kinds of talks? Today, I'm joined again by my good friend and occasional co-host, Connor Flanagan, as we dive deep into exactly how to be a great MC. For a PDF download of the four main principles that we discuss, check the link in the show notes. Love for you to pick that up if that's helpful. And speaking of helpful, if this podcast has been helpful to you, I would love to hear about it. And one of the best ways you can do that is to share a rating and a written review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And before we start, please be sure to stop by and say hi on Instagram at Better Preach, all one word. I'd love to connect there. Let's get into it.
Better Preach, baby. We're back.
We're back. So good to be here.
I got to be honest, it's taking you longer to have me back on the show than I would have hoped.
That's on me.
Yeah. I mean, my schedule's been wide open. I've been super available. I've basically been sitting outside your house waiting for a chance to get back on the Better Preach show. I know the people have been asking for it. I hope you all have been asking for it.
It's true. I get an email a day about that.
A day? Gosh,
a day.
Come on. Everyone.
I haven't had a whole lot.
I thought it would be more. If I'm being honest, this is hurting.
A day
right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I was hoping.
You thought it'd be five emails a day.
5. Better Preach, man. So stoked to be back on here, especially talking about stuff today that is kind of in my world as a musician.
It is.
I am an MC by trade in the old school terms of MC, and being a rapper, a hip hop artist, and there are so many crossovers, as you and I have been chatting about this episode, and even the work we've done over the last 5 or 6 years in the world of SPO, and we've done events outside of SPO together where I've performed and you've emceed or spoken at giving keynotes. And there's just so much crossover between the music world of being an artist and in the speaking event world of the person who is the MC. And so I'm super stoked to dive into this today.
Me too.
And hopefully I don't get too much into my world of music, but it's like I think of it as performance in a way.
Yeah.
You know, you have to build trust in an MC, you have to build trust as an artist. So anyways, can't wait to dive in and hear all your stories about it.
Let's do it.
Like when you're booked as a speaker, as
Yep.
Ryan O'Hara to come give a keynote, how important is it for you to know, is there going to be an MC?
It's one of the most important things that I want to talk to the host, whoever's inviting me in.
Yeah.
I will always, 10 out of 10, talk to them about what's the plan to lead, who's leading. I always ask that, who's leading the event? And a lot of times they're not sure what I mean by that.
They're just like, you are.
You are. And so it's always actually first kind of an education around, let's make sure that there's somebody who's guiding us through the event. The analogy I think is helpful is on-ramps and exit ramps for highways.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Like how would you get on a highway going 70 miles an hour if you didn't have an on-ramp? I mean, it would be wild if you think about that. Like people like kind of just dive bombing, over a bridge onto a road, or something. And so a speaker is coming in at 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
But the MC is first that on-ramp to kind of help acclimate the group and to figure out where they're at and help move them up to speed, literally. And then the handoff is made once you've made that transition into traffic, and then the speaker kind of takes it from there. And then the same thing is true on the other end.
Yeah.
Like, you need someone to then take what we've experienced together on this highway and move it to whatever is next. That's an exit ramp.
Yeah. I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but you said something that I think is often overlooked in the area of speakers being booked and being part of events. I even find this as a musician, where people start asking me how parts of the event should be run.
Yep.
And, sometimes that can stress me out because I'm like, I really just want to come in and play the show.
Yep.
You guys worry about the details. But
Yep.
I mean, this is a mission for me. This is my heart. And
Yep.
if I have experience in a place that I can share with them, I'm in, right?
Yep.
How do you handle that when you have to coach the people who are booking you? Or give us 1 or 2 pointers of like, how can you approach that professionally, humbly, when you're coming in as a speaker and you can see, you're like, ooh, this is not set up well for me. I want to make sure it is, so I deliver the best talk I can. How do you approach that situation?
I see that a lot, both in where talks are held in a church versus a kind of an all-purpose room.
Yeah.
I'd rather be in an all-purpose room, honestly.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because, again, Catholics sort of behave a certain way in church, which is good.
Yeah.
It doesn't really foster connection, like small group activity or talking with each other. People feel a little less comfortable with that. The pews are immovable. You just have rows or nothing else.
Yeah.
And again, usually the space is bigger than is necessary. I'm not filling a church of, 2,000 people. I'm usually in a church that could seat 1,000 people, but there's 200 people in the room.
Yeah.
I prefer to have a room that I'm speaking in feel full, feel
100%.
like this is the place to be, and then having a lot of flexibility around how you organize people in rows or in groups around tables or whatever it may be. So that's the first thing, is just talking a lot about space.
Yeah.
How I approach it humbly, I say, from my experience, I think this will be a better event if. And I just try to point out, what some of the pros and cons are of being in a church versus an all-purpose room, or, having an MC or a host versus not.
But so write that down if you're taking notes. Well, I would say that again. I think this event would be.
Yeah, from my experience, this event will be better if.
From my experience,
and usually people are like, yeah, I want a better event. I want a better experience. And it makes sense. Just like the on-ramp, exit ramp analogy, that's really helpful for me as I'm talking with kind of folks who are hosting events to see it. What they're thinking is, we need to hire a speaker.
Right.
Very, very rarely are they thinking we need to plan for the right host. That's almost never on their radar.
Would you say it's better for an event to have a local host who is unequipped and not skilled in the area versus having you step in last minute and host yourself, so to speak?
I'm speaking to a group of people I don't know.
Right.
And everyone is coming. They're not sure about what's happening. I'm not a big name. I'm not Father Mike Schmitz, who walks into a place and immediately people are like ready to listen. That's not where I'm at. But they have a familiar face that they know, and then they kind of extend their trust in that person to me because they welcome me into their world.
Yeah. I asked that question because I think I agree with that. And that's what I would have said, because there's so many times where, especially as a musician, you can't really host yourself. Like, it's really hard to get up there and say, hey, introducing Connor Flanagan, and then be like, I'm Connor Flanagan, I can't tell you how many times I've had to kind of do that. And I played a festival 2 summers ago, and the MC, we met, I came in super stoked to meet him. This guy looked awesome, and kind of looked him up and followed his ministry and was really excited about it. And he was really great. And we met quickly in person, kind of classic, hey, give me some notes to say some stuff about you, whatever. So I did. And then he gets up there, and it was a main stage slot for us, which was a huge deal. 1,500, 2,000 people on this hillside. And he could not have set me up worse. And it was funny, but it just made me realize it is so important. Like, bro, like, fake it till you make it, at least, these people need to know that you are excited about me coming up there because I have
Yeah.
no idea who I am. And he went as far as saying like, I've never met Connor before until like 5 minutes ago. He seems awesome. Like just like kind of, I'm like, wow, dude, thanks. I really got to come out there. And you know this from experience, but like if they do that correctly, it changes the whole show.
It totally
Because
does.
the anticipation, like the practicals, the anticipation of the audience, I can imagine for a talk too, like if a local person is the face saying, trust me, Ryan's worth listening to.
Yep.
That changes your entire kickoff to your talk, right?
Yeah, and especially if they can share something that's personal or meaningful, or just even if it's their own experience. He could genuinely have said, from my experience, Connor is X. He just had an experience of you.
Right.
He could actually speak to that. And he's not lying.
Yeah.
It's just he has a smaller experience, but it's true.
Yeah.
And so but you don't let people, behind the veil with that.
Or just go full hype. You don't
Yeah.
even have to get like heartfelt or like just be like excited.
Yes.
Even joy goes such a long way.
It does. Well, and what I think is a principle here is I like to think as an MC, think organic, not functional. I would rather have a functional MC than none at all.
Okay.
And by functional, I simply mean somebody who, even if they're tap the mic, is this thing on? Fine. Okay.
Yeah.
Good morning. It's great to have you here.
Yeah.
I want to, and they just literally play the part. That's the bare bones, but
Right.
that's not the ceiling of what we're going for. But the best, there's an organic quality to their hosting, that they're in the moment, they're responding to the reality in front of them, and bringing something of themselves to it, and they cross the T's and dot the I's. They have a plan for how to introduce someone. What I would prefer 10 times out of 10 for an MC, I have a bio and I always send it to them.
Yeah.
I would want you to can you remember 3 things about me?
Yeah.
Share those 3 things without looking at your notes.
Oh, please.
When they read the bio, it's cringy for me.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm kind of a smaller speaker out there. I don't have an impressive bio.
Yeah.
So, just share a few things about, I work for this. Here's a little bit about my family. Here's some of my experience. I went to Notre Dame. These kinds of things like, oh, okay, this guy's good. I can listen to him.
Right.
But so that for me, even taking an organic approach to the introduction, and then even ask me like, what's an interesting fact that's not on your bio? I'll share something with you.
Yeah.
I would much rather hear that than anyone, again, just does the functional read of the bio. I would love for MCs to think organic, kind of live and in the moment, real, authentic person,
right,
who is welcoming a group of people, and then more naturally, like you would at a party, introduce a friend to your friends.
I mean, how much work needs to go in to be at that organic, professional, polished level?
I think the first thing I would say, another principle, is to think trail guide, not teacher. In my opinion, it's easier to give a talk than it is to be an MC.
Yeah.
There's a lot more work, and it requires a lot more flexibility, spontaneity, and being really alert to your surroundings and what's actually happening. That's more like a trail guide who's familiar with going from point A to point B to point C to point D. They know the trail well, and they can help people navigate the twists and turns. Again, if it's just one talk, that's one thing. But if it has to be sustained for a weekend or for a conference, there's a stamina that's required there that requires a lot of preparation. But the preparation has more to do with understanding the goals of the weekend, being able to, from memory, kind of talk through what is the path for the weekend. You need to get to a point
from memory.
If you have to read what we're about to do, you could have just put it up on the screen and have us read it.
Right.
I want you to have a working knowledge of where we're going so that you can bring people along with you. Reading something, again, kind of like the bio, isn't going to cut it. But we also don't need a 20-minute treatise, memorized treatise before each talk.
Yeah.
We need context. Where are we? Where are we going? How should I approach what we're about to do? And just talk to me like you're talking to a group of friends.
Yeah.
And so that takes preparation, you've got to pray.
Amen. Man.
You've got to be praying. You've got to become really familiar with the content, even though you're not speaking. But when you think about it, over a retreat or a conference, over multiple talks, you may speak more than any one of the other keynotes do. So they hear from you as an MC over time more than you would hear from any one speaker. So if you're going to get 5 killer keynotes, you need a 6th killer MC to kind of bear up the trail that we're going on together.
Yeah, we have a mutual friend who we have had MC events, and we've had him give keynotes at events. And after he MC'd an event, I remember he came up and was like, "Bro, I never want to do that again." He was like, "I'm just gonna be straight up. I want people to hire me to come in and just swing for the fences on a killer keynote and then leave the rest." Because the preparation that I saw was grueling. They were in the corners of the event center, Bibles open, notebooks, going through stuff constantly. And I think part of that was because as the event unfolded, the content unfolded too. And God started to have his way at the event. And so, to your point, the spiritual gravity of an MC is huge. And I think is probably the most underrated part of being an MC is how attuned are you, MC, to what God is doing in this moment? Because you have to be paying attention to where the people are at, where you're at, where the worship team may be at, if there's a worship team. What is God doing? Where the previous keynote left you and where the next keynote's coming in. And then if all of that starts to go awry, I think of the Spider-Man movies. He's holding all these buildings together with his webs, and that's the MC in the middle sometimes. Damage control of this talk went 10 minutes over and landed in a completely different place than we thought. And the next talk is coming up starting where we thought he would start. So how do you handle that?
Right. And I think, again, another principle of kind of direction and damage control. When the gospel is announced, when the gospel is preached, it always elicits a response. There's a response that's built in.
Yeah.
It isn't always the speaker who is helping to pastor or lead or guide that response. It's going to be the MC. It's going to be in a time of prayer that follows. And again, that's really oftentimes the role of the MC. They actually have to help usher in a meaningful response and give solid pastoral direction. That's not scripted.
Yeah.
But as you're planning for a night, you're anticipating, I'm going to invite people to make a response, and I can't maybe script that out, but I'm going to be working during the talk to really think about, Lord, what is it that I could say that would be most helpful without it becoming another talk or becoming too much. But the other thing that you're alluding to is damage control. Is that the speaker says what the speaker says. They either maybe say something pastorally insensitive or hopefully not heretical.
Right.
Or they just don't talk about what you thought they were going to talk about.
Yeah.
And it's important that they had, but they didn't. So you have to kind of fill in a little bit of the blanks. That's on you. You're not calling the person out. You're not noting, hey, this person didn't about what we were supposed to talk about. I'll share with you what we were supposed to do. Never do that, obviously.
Yeah.
So as an MC, this happens about 10% of the time. You're actually doing some damage control, but I never would let the group know that's
no. You're the first line of defense.
That's happening.
Yeah,
that's right. As I'm an MC, it's a lot of time praying and just listening to the Holy Spirit as the person is speaking, and kind of waiting for the Holy Spirit to put a finger on a point on. Here's what I want you to build off of.
Yeah. Well, and I think that speaks to the importance of the MC knowing the major points of every keynote.
Yep.
Right? If you're sitting there listening to the talk, you need to be like, uh-oh, they're not going where we thought. So I as the MC have to start thinking about how can I land this plane so the next one can take off, the next talk. And however, I don't want to just speak about this in a negative light. What if a keynote absolutely just crushes?
Yeah.
Right. And God shows up in such a powerful way where you as an MC are like, I'm speechless. Like there is a presence in the room. There was a breakthrough in this talk. I've seen that happen. And then I've seen MCs still feel like they have to over process that moment. And I think oftentimes as MCs, less is more.
I think if there's a principle that's coming through all of this whole conversation, you have to be spiritually present to what's actually happening, right? So
say that again.
You have to be spiritually present to what's actually happening.
Yeah.
So what actually happened was they took, in the previous conversation, they took a misstep. It didn't quite hit the mark. That actually happened. So you have to be spiritually present to that and help kind of get the group back on track. But you also have to be spiritually present to what's actually happening when actually what would be most helpful is less of you, less of even what you might have thought you were going to do. I've seen it happen right up to the last 5 minutes of the talk. Then all of a sudden something shifts. I had a plan, and it was a good plan, a spiritual plan. But then in the last 5 minutes, something shifted. So I need to still be able to shift.
Yeah.
And so being spiritually present to what's actually happening, I think, is another helpful principle.
That's so good.
And sometimes it depends on the environment, but sometimes standing in front of a group and just being able to say, could we just take a few moments of silence?
Yeah.
You don't walk off, but you stand kind of in the place of the leader. And you just say, close your eyes, open your eyes, keep them open. We're just going to pray and be alert and attentive and silent here. And we'll wrap this, you just give them a little bit of direction, but that's okay too, to actually, as an MC, to stand with a group, attentively listening to what God might be speaking to individuals or to us as a group.
Yeah, that's got to require such a confident humility, because I think your point of staying on the stage is a big deal.
Yeah.
Right. As soon as someone leaves the stage, it's like, is this a transition? Are we done with this session?
Right.
Where's the focal point? And not that you as the person are the focal point, but you are the leader,
right?
You're the driver. We've talked about like the conductor of the orchestra,
Yep.
like you leaving that stage, they've lost their trail guide.
Right.
Right. And even though you're not saying anything or doing anything, you're still the guide in that moment of silence.
And what I might do, just as a kind of a symbol, I might stay on the stage or up front, but I might move kind of off to the side.
Yeah.
And just, again, allow that space. I don't want anybody looking at me. I'm
Right.
not important, but my presence there as the leader is important. And because people always want to know, is somebody in charge? Does somebody have a plan? Have you ever been a part of, this is hard. I deal with this a lot, where there will be a prayer time and there will get a point where there's prolonged silence. And I kind of wonder, is anybody leading?
Yeah.
And that's probably a bit of my control freakness, but I think it's important that people know in spiritual moments that someone is leading and they understand that, it has to be managed and led.
Yeah, well, and they're thinking about where we're going next.
Yes.
But your audience for this podcast, I mean, it's wide, but there are a lot of just Catholic speakers, people who want to be prepping and doing better in their talks and preaching. What would you say to people who are giving talks regularly,
Mm-hmm.
big scale, small scale,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter, who want to be or find themselves in the space of being an MC? Because they are very different areas, and we've covered a lot of that already, but are there some practical tips or pointers or areas to look out for as you are transitioning from giving keynotes to MCing?
I think the biggest challenge is that you're speaking usually in 2 to 5 minute bursts. And for most seasoned speakers, we start and a 45-minute clock runs and we end.
Yeah.
And so the biggest issue I've seen is that you are not giving a talk.
Yep.
your job is to help the one who is giving the talk to be successful. And really, you're in the crowd too.
Yeah.
You're receiving the content and you're helping people to appropriate it. It's so there's proclamation and response. And in some ways, you're kind of like the leader of the response. You're not the one that's proclaiming the word, but you're helping to pastor people into the response from the word. Most of the time, we prepare talks, and I think you have to think in much smaller bits, and it would feel uncomfortably so. So brevity,
Yeah.
and thinking of yourself as a guide into and out of talks is, I think that's the biggest transition that people need to make.
You and I feel very passionately about announcements.
We do, don't we?
We do. So talk to me about the importance of MCs just crushing like the simplest tasks of being an MC.
Right. I do not believe that there's like a spiritual MC and then the administrator
Right.
comes out and gives the announcements. I saw this happen first with my favorite speaker MC, Louis Giglio. I went to Passion Conference with 20,000 people, college students, ding ding, and Louis Giglio he's the MC of the event. He also gives the first and last talk. That's a whole nother piece. I don't think MCs should always also give a talk.
Yeah. I
have thoughts about that. I don't know if we'll get into that, but anyhow, he always brought out note cards. So I've watched him do this. It's different with his talks, but when he's an MC, he has just simple 3x5 note cards, and on it are the announcements. And so he's the shepherd of the weekend, and he's going to actually be the one who will make the announcements the most effective. All of our rapport, all of our trust is in this MC, and the announcements aren't an afterthought.
Right.
And we have to be really clear about what they are. And I actually think it's important, again, to memorize them, meaning I can speak about it spontaneously. I'm not just reading something.
Right.
So whenever I give announcements, it's literally I write like a bullet list of the announcements, but I want to bring my energy, my enthusiasm around each of the announcements and underscore the value of where people need to be, what time this is happening, and all of those details. That's an underrated part of the MC's job is to help people with these practical details as well. Because what ends up happening is you have kind of the spiritual MC and then the administrative MC. They're not comfortable in front of a big group. Maybe that's not their profession. People aren't listening. Things get lost, and it's just a downer.
Yeah.
And so I think like the regular MC can be most effective with the right amount of energy, but you also have to make sure that you don't miss details.
Right.
So that's one time where you really do have to pay attention to details. So your mind has to actually go to a slightly different place.
Yeah.
And so I'm a big fan of the MC also doing the announcements at a big conference.
Yeah. Because the MC's built the trust with the people.
Exactly.
Right? And in some ways, those announcements can be more important to some people than the keynote they just heard.
That's right.
They're like, I'm tired. I got to find my room. I haven't checked in yet. Where's the coffee at? I'm falling asleep. Like there are things that, people get hangry. And if you mail in the announcements, I think it shows that you actually care less about the event than your attendees do. And your attendees may have spent thousands, literally, of dollars to come to this thing.
The reason I came to the conviction that the MC should also do the announcements was I had a really awkward moment, and it was me. I was the MC of this conference back in Arizona, and a coworker of mine was the administrator for the event, and she would give the announcements. And I remember going out on stage. Matt Maher was leading the music, and I was going out to do just a little bit of a spiritual wrap up. And then she was going to do the announcements, and she came out with me, and I got sort of wrapped up in the moment. I started kind of leading a response. Matt Maher picks the guitar back up underneath. I'm like, well, we're going now to spiritual places.
The train has left.
Yeah. And poor Andrea, there's a great picture of her looking at me like, what are you doing? And I'm like preaching. Matt Maher is in the background, going for it. And I'm like, this is incredible. Come, Lord Jesus. And then I was like, sharp left turn. Hey guys, we need to do some announcements. It was brutal.
Did you feel like that moment was led though by the Lord? Were you supposed to go there, or was it a little bit of like, I want to go there?
This is where, as an MC, I didn't have a good plan. We needed to make some announcements.
Right.
I didn't have a good plan to kind of wrap up quickly and transition to announcements because they needed to happen. I more let myself be kind of overtaken by the moment and didn't play my role. It was like I was a trail guide, and I just decided to go to a dangerous area that I know I shouldn't. There's like a sign, don't go,
then leave them there.
And then leave them there. I tell this story because it's really a tell on me.
Yeah.
It was a pastoral administrative mistake I made. And if it was me giving the announcements, we could have followed the Lord wherever we wanted to go and not have the person giving the announcements standing there awkwardly.
Yeah, waiting. Yeah.
And so it was only because I knew she was there feeling uncomfortable that I was like, we have to do this. So again, a little bit of an anecdote, but like that really helped me to see if the MC can manage all that needs to be said from the stage, there's maximum flexibility.
Yeah. Well, as with all things, if we're going to look for the source of truth on this matter, we need to go to the Bible.
That's true.
And so I want to know,
Okay.
Ryan, as your closing thought here for this episode, who do you think scripturally was the ultimate MC? Can we find an MC in the scriptures?
Wow. That's a cool question. Gospel writer, maybe. How about John, the Apostle John?
Okay. Say
more.
more.
Why? Matthew, Mark, and Luke sort of wrote more kind of blow by blow. Here are the facts. Here's the news, reporting the news. That's more like giving the talk. But John provided context. John kind of stepped back. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things, that came into being through him.
That's good.
And interestingly enough, he was the only apostle who didn't die a martyr's death. So in some ways, he was present for the entire apostolic age. As an MC, he's there for the whole thing. And so, let's call the Apostle John the patron saint of MCs.
I love that. So if you are a keynote speaker, you are more likely to die a martyr's death. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. If you want to prevent that, start MCing.
That's right. Oh man. Well, Ryan, such a source of wisdom on this topic, and I think speakers can actually offer a lot to events in the ways of MCs. Like we talked about today, because they need it. Events need they need a story to be told. It can't just be a one-off talk and then one and done, so to speak. So I hope this episode would bless people in that space.
Agreed. Thanks, Connor.
Yeah,
Love it.
Thanks. Peace, bro.
Peace. If this podcast has been helpful to you, please let me know. Please share a rating and a written review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. A big shout out to my podcast production partner, David Vessel. Thanks for making this look and sound so good. And to all of you, you have millions of options when it comes to podcasts. Thanks for press and play today. See you next time.